Chapter 71 Conversation in the Principal's Office. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Of course, Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore led Adam away, and the curious students dispersed, looking disappointed. So, Adam really took care of the monster in the Chamber of Secrets. Cologne's face was a mix of confusion, puzzlement, and amusement. He was still eating his cornflakes. Looks like it. If Harry was lying, Adam would have spoken up by now. Eugene remembered Adam's disappearances and added, and if it wasn't true, Dumbledore wouldn't have come. Adam went on an adventure in the Chamber of Secrets without us. Bernard said regretfully. I doubt it's a story worth sharing. Remembering the records about secret chambers in the pyramids, Uther squinted and glanced around. Let's head back to the dorm after breakfast and wait for Adam. I bet they'll be busting down the door to ask us about it soon. Adam followed Dumbledore to the headmaster's office, where McGonagall, Snape, and Sprout were already waiting. Where's Flitwick? He also noticed Harry, who was avoiding eye contact. Adam. Is what Harry said true? Professor Sprout rushed over, grabbed Adam's hand, and examined him closely. I'm sorry, Adam, I didn't realize. Harry's voice trailed off. He'd blurted it out to prove he wasn't to blame, only to realize the impact of his words when everyone turned to Adam for confirmation. Adam hadn't caught what Harry said, focused as he was on reassuring his anxious head of house. Professor Sprout, it's true, but it's all taken care of now. Oh, right, Mr. Reed can even handle the monster in the Chamber of Secrets, and took down a professor last night. What could possibly scare him? Snape's sarcastic tone made Adam want to protest. Taking down a professor was your idea, Snape, but he knew it was Snape's way of showing concern, telling him not to be reckless, so he swallowed the retort. Severus, that's enough. McGonagall, who had been standing by Harry, approached Adam. Adam, I'm not saying you're lying, but, what was the monster you dealt with? I mean, maybe it was just some magical creature, and you assumed it was. It was a basilisk, Professor. Adam's answer cut off McGonagall's sentence. Basilisk? Also known as the King of Serpents. Its venom is instantly lethal, and direct eye contact can kill. Snape subtly prompted McGonagall, who was struggling to recall details about the basilisk. Unlike little Potter, with his understanding of Adam, although this matter sounded as outrageous as Merlin's resurrection, Adam should not talk nonsense casually. But if it was a basilisk, why was the cat just petrified before? That explains it. Mrs. Norris saw the basilisk's reflection in the knight's armor, so she was only petrified. Dumbledore, who had been quiet since entering the office, spoke up, clearing up everyone's confusion. Harry still looked lost. But, there hasn't been a basilisk in Britain for over 400 years. Sprout was still doubtful. It's been dormant in the Chamber of Secrets. It really hasn't been seen in 400 years. It's been there for 1,000. Adam explained. But, how did you manage it? And how did you know it was a basilisk? McGonagall finally found her voice. And why didn't you tell us? Why did you face something so dangerous alone? Professor McGonagall, let me answer your questions one at a time. Adam raised his hand and summoned the dark staff, surprising everyone. First, how I did it. I used this, a magical heirloom from my ancestors. Dumbledore's eyes flickered with curiosity. He didn't know Nicholas Flamel had such a magical item, but Adam's next explanation dispelled Dumbledore's doubt. It was from ancestors in China. The existence of the Clow cards wasn't a secret, but their details were vague. Using the heirloom as a cover for his power, Adam continued, as for how I discovered it, do you professors know Moaning Myrtle? Dumbledore's eyes flashed again. Moaning Myrtle was once his student. Adam explained that he'd pieced together the rumors about the chamber being opened, Myrtle's story, and the discovery of spider corpses in the castle, leading him to believe the monster was a basilisk. How did you figure that out? Harry murmured, wide-eyed. The professors knew about basilisks, but Harry didn't, so he couldn't understand how these clues led to that conclusion. Ignoring Harry, Adam went on, finally, why I didn't tell you, like I said, it was just a guess. Plus, I was confident I could handle it, so I went alone. The professors were silent after hearing his explanation. Adam's story was a bit outlandish, but everything seemed to fit. So, aside from how you heroically defeated the basilisk, who opened the Chamber of Secrets, Snape crossed his arms, narrowing his eyes. That person must know the chamber well. They must have known about the basilisk and how to control it. Sprout seemed to catch his drift and glared at Snape, pulling Adam closer. Severus, what are you implying? Knowing Snape's tendencies, even if he believed that he would habitually say something to himself out of worry and fear, Adam secretly sighed, and then made a gesture to Professor Dumbledore in Professor Sprout's arms. With a glance, Professor Dumbledore suddenly understood and said, Severus, let's not jump to conclusions. We should be cautious, but we can't accuse a student without evidence. Dumbledore stood up. All right, it seems most things are clear now. Adam and I will discuss the remaining details over lunch. Everyone, please go back. You probably have classes to prepare for this afternoon. The professors reluctantly left, McGonagall taking Harry with her. Okay, it's just us now. Dumbledore winked at Adam. What would you like for lunch? Let me take care of it. Adam waved the wand of darkness, and a plate of hot brownie-flavored pizza appeared on the table. He looked at Dumbledore, whose eyes lit up, and said, Professor, what do you want to eat? Chapter 72 The Magic of Love. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chew, 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 gulp. After polishing off the last of the apple cinnamon pie, Professor Dumbledore finished hearing Adam's story and eyed the diary with only 4 pages left. He sighed, looking at the pathetic thing. Tom, did it ever cross your mind that the Horcrux you created by murdering someone would end up so fragile? Something wrong, Professor Dumbledore? Adam asked. Oh, just thinking, Dumbledore replied with a shake of his head, then began answering Adam's question. This diary is supposed to be a Horcrux. An incredibly evil piece of dark magic that requires taking a life to make. That's why it has such strong magic resistance. He raised his eyebrows. In fact, most magic in the world can't even touch it. Otherwise, Voldemort wouldn't have gone to the extreme of splitting his soul to make Horcruxes. Unfortunately for Voldemort, his Horcrux ran into Adam. With another sigh, Dumbledore suddenly thought of the basilisk. If he remembered correctly, its venom was potent enough to destroy Horcruxes. Is the basilisk's body still in the chamber? No, it's still alive. Good, that it's, wait, what? Dumbledore's eyes widened as Adam pulled a dark, round container from his bag. It was a glass jar wrapped in black cloth. I shrunk the basilisk and caught it. It's right here. Adam peeked through a gap in the cloth. Sleeping now. Dumbledore's jaw dropped. He felt his brain stutter. Want to see it, Professor? No thanks. Dumbledore finally found his voice. You shrunk the basilisk? Yep. Its strength is reduced too. Now, even a glass jar can hold it. Dumbledore started to point out that basilisk skin had magic resistance almost as good as a dragon's hide, but since the magic resistance of a Horcrux was far superior to either, he decided not to bother. He just stared at the black jar, hesitating. Adam, I have to remind you that keeping a basilisk is illegal. Professor, I checked the wizarding laws. Breeding basilisks is illegal. Just keeping one isn't. Adam blinked innocently. So, as long as I can prove I didn't breed it, I'm not breaking any laws. Okay, you got me there. Dumbledore paused, thinking. But keeping such a dangerous creature on school grounds. Professor Dumbledore. This basilisk is safest with me. Should I let it loose? Or should I kill it? Yes, it killed someone once, but wasn't that the Dark Lord's doing? Adam gave him his most earnest look, hoping to appeal to Dumbledore's good nature. Besides that, all it's done since birth is sleep in Hogwarts for nearly 1,000 years, it's practically part of the building and witnessed the whole history. Dumbledore peered into Adam's eyes. Legilimency showed nothing, but he saw genuine affection for magical creatures, which reminded him of an old friend. If they were here, they'd probably be fighting to protect the basilisk, and after all, Adam was just a student, a Hufflepuff, and Nico Flammel's heir. And he'd just saved the school. What harm could he really do? Finally, Dumbledore relented. All right. But you have to guarantee that no student will be hurt by that basilisk, not even petrified. Of course, I can, Professor. Adam grinned, stowing the basilisk jar. By the way, I read that you learned Parseltongue, even though you weren't born with it. Is that right? Dumbledore blinked, understanding what Adam was getting at. It was actually a pretty good idea. Communicating with the basilisk would certainly help Adam care for it. After a moment, Dumbledore gestured, and a book floated off the shelf into his hand. Here's a book on snake language and mermaid language. Just remember to return it when you're done. Sure thing. Keep what we discussed in my office to yourself. If anyone asks, tell them I asked you to keep it secret. No problem, Professor, but... Harry seemed to overhear a lot. I'll have Minerva talk to him. Dumbledore sighed. So, that's about it. Finally. He paused, a smile spreading across his face. 200 points to Hufflepuff for getting rid of the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets before anyone got hurt. Adam was surprised, but not really. It would be stranger if Dumbledore didn't give him extra points. It might seem a little forced that Harry always got Gryffindor extra points at the end of the year, but he usually deserved them. Otherwise, the other professors would have something to say about it. Dumbledore wasn't done yet. And for uncovering the truth about the Chamber of Secrets all those years ago, Hufflepuff gets another 50 points. I thank you on behalf of Myrtle and Hagrid, who was wrongly accused. Seems like we'll need to clear a spot in the trophy room for a medal. Just doing my part, Professor. Dumbledore smiled and nodded. Remember to keep all this confidential, and keep an eye on your little pet. Now, off you go. Leaving the office, Adam tallied up his gains. First, he'd gone public about the Clow cards and his knowledge of Horcruxes. Now his spellcasting wouldn't have to be so secretive, and he could deal with the Ravenclaw diadem from the Room of Requirement. Second, there was the basilisk. Dumbledore gave him a book on Parseltongue, and even threw in mermaid language as a bonus. Score. Finally, there was the love card. Yep, that love card is powerful. That was the key effect Adam had accidentally discovered. The love card subtly influenced those around him. For people he already had some kind of emotional bond with, the love card seemed to act like a halo, justifying his actions. The effect was proportional to the strength of the emotions and how emotionally driven the person was. Even with something as crazy as keeping a basilisk at school, Dumbledore went along with it. He must be way more emotional than Adam gave him credit for. Originally, Adam thought he'd have to put up a stronger argument and was ready to sacrifice the basilisk. Now, it seemed he could make some basilisk soup or maybe even a dragon phoenix combo dish. Shifting gears from food back to the love card, Adam thought about the effects he'd seen so far. It seemed it did more than just influence the people around him. Chapter 73 Lockhart becomes restless again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Besides affecting people, Adam discovered another ability of the love card that felt a bit magical. He wasn't sure what it was for, but the hazy figure with red hair and green eyes he kept seeing near Harry had to be the card's doing. No other Clow card could explain it, since that was the only weird thing happening. Adam couldn't really test it out, so he decided to shelve the question for now. On the way back to the dorm, everyone kept bugging Adam about the Chamber of Secrets, but he had the same answer for everyone. Dumbledore wants me to keep it under wraps. Maybe ask him. That the other students were stumped by the fact that this honest badger was actually holding up his end of the deal, but it was clear that the Chamber of Secrets thing was done and over with. Dumbledore wasn't gonna use all those extra Hufflepuff house points on candy. Back in the dorm, Adam finally caught a break, but then he was met with the combined stares of his 4 roommates. Their expressions were complicated, like Lin Dayu looking at Jia Baoyu, which somehow made Adam feel a twinge of guilt, even though he hadn't actually done anything wrong. Okay, okay, guys, hear me out. Adam threw his hands up in surrender, the 5 of them piled onto the small sofa, and Adam told them everything that had happened. Even though he promised Dumbledore secrecy, his roommates were obviously an exception. Plus, they were good at keeping their mouths shut, unlike a certain groundskeeper who seemed to be raised on a steady diet of truth serum. After the story, Adam emphasized again. It's not that I didn't want to bring you guys. It wasn't all that exciting, and that basilisk was super dangerous. Yeah, it sounds pretty boring, Bernard sighed, disappointed. A secret chamber that turned out to be a sewer with a giant snake that could kill you with a look. That wasn't how he imagined it at all. There should have been a series of puzzles to solve, maybe some massive golems or magical creatures guarding the place, right? After hearing Bernard's rant, Adam thought that if he had been born 100 years earlier, if he could have met a 5th-grade transfer student, he might have been able to see what he wanted to see. So, what about the basilisk? Can we see it? Eugene was curious about the legendary beast. Adam considered it. I'll show you the eyes once I dig them out. They were going to kill it and make a potion anyway, so why not let them take a look? Never mind. Isn't it kinda messed up to dig out its eyes just to show us? Cologne said with a frown, then Adam said, it's gonna end up in a stew anyway. Then we're in. Cologne immediately changed his tune, swallowing hard, who cared about deadly poison? He was sure Adam would handle it. If not, he still had his unicorn horn chopsticks. He knew he'd find a use for them one day. Christmas was coming, maybe he'd give everyone a set as a gift. The gifts for everyone except Adam were solved in one go, then they started talking about when to go to the Forbidden Forest. They'd been putting it off for ages, and if they didn't go now, it'd be next year. Why not go during Christmas break? Uther suggested. We've got homework during the week, and it feels too rushed to squeeze it in on the weekends. Even though it was an adventure, they didn't have a specific goal. It was more like a fun trip to the Forbidden Forest. If they had to worry about rushing back to do homework, it would take away from the fun. But isn't it dangerous to go into the Forbidden Forest in the snow? Eugene frowned. It's December, it's probably gonna snow even if we go tomorrow, Bernard sighed. Eugene and Cologne, who had repeatedly delayed the trip for their own reasons, were left speechless. So, the Christmas holiday was officially chosen. Don't worry, I promise I can keep everyone safe this time, Adam said, patting his chest. Now that he was so good at protective magic, the next day, the mood at Hogwarts shifted. The threat of the Chamber of Secrets was gone, and the dark cloud that had been hanging over the castle lifted. The students were suddenly lively again. The only ones bummed out were probably the Slytherins, who prided themselves on being purebloods. Just yesterday, they could look down on the mudbloods and see the half-bloods scrambling, but everything had changed. They even tried to boycott Adam's products to hurt him, but not many people joined in. Even Slytherins weren't all purebloods, after all. Instead, after the news got out, all the non-pureblood wizards flocked to Adam's store to buy stuff, both to vent their emotions. They needed sweets to cope with the fear, and to support Adam. So, instead of suffering losses, Adam's sales skyrocketed, and he made a ton of money. I get why so many businesses like to start drama. It's a money maker. Too bad I don't really care about money. Making money is, like, a problem for me now. After working non-stop from opening to closing, Adam was exhausted. He sighed, opening this store is the biggest regret of my life. I was happiest when I was just selling snacks out of a bag. I can't go back now. Cedric, who was buying the last sweet osmanthus lotus root, felt a twinge of toothache when he heard that, but hey, Adam's candy didn't cause cavities. It must be an illusion from too much defense against the dark arts class. He quickly took a sip of honey tea to soothe it. His classmates had insisted on adding way too much honey, but the sweetness of the lotus root balanced it out, creating a burst of flavor that eased Cedric's frown. Adam, did you hear? Hear what? After cleaning up the cart, Adam turned and saw Cedric leaning in to whisper. Lockhart said in class today that he knew where the Chamber of Secrets was and what monster was in it, and that you were able to defeat it because of his guidance. Looks like he's completely healed, Adam said, narrowing his eyes. Normally, he wouldn't care about rumors, but why was Lockhart so hated? Since he'd just finished releasing The Grudge for his roommates, Adam was thinking about getting into the movie business. He was trying to decide how realistic to make it without going too far. Lockhart just happened to be around, so why not use Professor Lockhart to experiment, or, give him the experience? Why not start with the 8D Conjuring Series Joint Version? Chapter 74 Second Journey to the Forbidden Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Studying at Hogwarts flies by for most young wizards. Another heavy snowfall marked Adam's second Christmas there. Alright, settle down, everyone. Remembering last year's chaos, the young wizards this time tried to snag decorations the second they entered the Great Hall. Professor Dumbledore quickly intervened. Let's try to keep the table reasonably tidy by the end of dinner, shall we? No problem, Professor Dumbledore, that the twins' reply was loud enough for even Hufflepuffs to hear. Then, quicker than you could blink, they snatched the vase from the table. Hey, Ron stared, dumbfounded. The twins just grinned. Ronnikins, we're going to finish this whole vase of flowers. Wouldn't want things getting messy on the table, would we? As they spoke, they split the bouquet and started smashing the vase with their spoons. The flowers. Floral cloud cake. The branches. Hazelnut-filled pocky sticks. The vase itself. Sweet, like mint candy. Oh, and Adam told us everything on the table is actually edible this year. Yeah, we swear on Wizard Wheezes. Ron hesitated. But, considering the sacred place Wizard Wheezes held in Fred and George's hearts, they wouldn't lie, would they? Ow! Ron took a bite out of the corner of the table, and his eyes widened. It wasn't easy to chew, but the texture definitely wasn't wood. It really was edible. Harry watched him, a little worried. Ron was so focused on the twins' promise, had he even thought about what Wizard Wheezes was all about? After much effort, Ron finally managed to bite off a chunk of the table. He chewed it with anticipation, then his face slowly crumpled. What is this? Ugh! He stuck out his tongue, covered in a dark, sticky goo. 100% pure chocolate, we guaranteed it was edible. The twins exchanged identical smiles and high-fived. Just didn't say everyone would like the taste. Sometimes I wonder, just how many crazy food ideas are floating around in Adam's head. Cedric, his mouth stuffed with strawberries, mumbled. What you should be wondering is how many kinds of food there are in the world. Adam reached out and snagged a passing gingerbread man, popping it into his mouth. Brown sugar flavored. The Christmas banquet was in full swing when Cologne spoke up. Hey, something felt off. Turns out, Professor Lockhart isn't here. Why bring him up? Isn't it better that he isn't here? Bernard scowled at the mention of his name. I'm just saying, usually he wouldn't miss a chance to be the center of attention. Cologne considered this, then decided it was probably bad luck to dwell on it. He turned his attention back to the golden, crispy red bean pie in front of him. Lockhart. He was probably too busy charming new female fans like Annabelle, the ghost sister, and Corona. He wouldn't have time for holiday dances. The man who helped secure a normal Christmas holiday for everyone just shrugged, keeping his involvement quiet. The next day, everyone slept in. In the afternoon, some played wizard chess by the fire, some read, and some practiced spells. After dinner, they all gathered in Adam's dorm, their destination, the Forbidden Forest. Adam, you sure this is okay? I feel a little silly in this pose. Lit by the soft glow of a Lumos charm, Cologne was half squatting with one hand on the ground, striking a thoughtful pose. Yeah, me too. Uther leaned sideways, holding his elbow and pointing his index finger at his forehead, half his face obscured by shadow. Almost done. Come on. 3, 2, 1. The flash went off, capturing their poses for posterity. Phew. Eugene lowered his arm and took a deep breath, rubbing his cheek. I'm starting to regret this. It's not going to look stupid when it's developed, is it? Nah, no way. Everyone looks awesome. Adam waved his hand and hurried to pack away the camera. Thanks to a charm, the camera and tripod fit perfectly in the satchel's small compartment. We didn't get any photos last time we went to the Forbidden Forest. This time, the scenery's even better. I just hope we don't run into any acromantulas again. Bernard sighed. Those things really ruined the adventure vibe. Don't worry, I brought a secret weapon for dealing with acromantulas this time. Even if we see one, we'll be fine. Adam patted his satchel. If they ran into an acromantula, he'd just open the jar and let out the basilisk. With the spider's 360-degree vision and eyes that couldn't close, the basilisk was guaranteed to win. With that reassurance, the group of 5 ventured into the Forbidden Forest. The grass just moved on the left up ahead. Something must have spotted us and ran off. Wanna chase it? Bernard held up his lantern excitedly. Adam's light orbs lit the way, but carrying a lantern just felt more adventurous. It's probably just a rabbit. Cologne analyzed calmly, then hesitated. But a baby mooncalf could be that size too. The moon's not right for mooncalves to be out tonight. Adam glanced at the waning moon overhead. But this is our first discovery. Can't hurt to check it out. Finding tracks in the grass, the 5 followed them to a small river. There's a river in the Forbidden Forest, Cologne exclaimed, then smacked himself on the forehead. Right, duh. I'm an idiot. The forest and its creatures couldn't survive on just rainwater. Bad news, we probably lost the chase. Good news, we're more likely to find magical creatures near a river. Uther walked to the riverbank and knelt down, examining the ground for tracks. This looks like a deer. What about this hoof print? Centaur, unicorn, hippogriff, could be anything. The tracks might not tell us much. Adam shrugged, then suddenly reached out and yanked Uther back. Watch out. Just as Uther moved, a large green mouth lunged out of the water. Stupefied, blood clouded the river. Uther clutched his chest, his heart pounding. That was a Grindylow. Even though it was just a glimpse, Cologne recognized the creature. Grindylows were small water demons with surprising strength, but they were easy to kill. Usually, they only bothered unsuspecting muggles and very young wizards. Their danger level was XX, the same as Puffskeins. The danger isn't the point, it's just kind of scary to have something suddenly pop out like that. Adam had been caught off guard and reacted instinctively. In reality, he could have easily taken out the Grindylow, shield or no shield, he still wasn't used to magic being real, it seemed. Chapter 75, Meeting in the Deep Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Grindylow was just a small taste of what was to come. As they followed the river, they stumbled upon much more. They saw ordinary animals like deer and rabbits, but then they found 2 mooncalf nests. Adam was fascinated by their big eyes and wondered about the mooncalves' thought processes, but after a couple of pats on their soft fur, Adam shelved that slightly creepy question. Seriously? Cologne just squatted down, whining, do I look scary or something? It was a joke, of course. Everyone in their group was pretty decent looking, but Cologne still felt a little stung. Maybe Adam just fits what mooncalves find attractive, that even when Uther crouched down, the mooncalves wouldn't run. But if he reached for them, they'd shy away a little. Then there was Adam, who was now getting hugged and nuzzled by a mooncalf. TSK. Cologne was still processing his envy when Eugene, quick as ever, rubbed against Adam and snagged a mooncalf hug himself. This place has gotta be pretty safe, Eugene remarked. Mooncalves and the other ordinary animals they'd seen wouldn't last long against serious predators, especially magical ones. Their presence meant that the area was relatively predator-free. Ouch! A sudden shriek cut through the air. Adam and the others jumped up, searching for the source of the sound. Ahem, never mind, I'm okay. Bernard said, clutching his stomach. I was just wondering if that pink mooncalf was a boy or a girl. I lifted its tail to check, and it kicked me. Not far away, a pink mooncalf was hopping and yelping up a storm. It was definitely swearing. Adam, who was studying Parseltongue, made a mental note of the mooncalf's colorful language. Turns out, cursing is the fastest way to learn any language. You're lucky it wasn't a hippogriff, Cologne grumbled. You'd be paced by now. Hey, if it was a hippogriff, I wouldn't have looked it in the eye in the first place. Bernard defended himself as curious, not stupid. We should move on, Eugene said. We've been here long enough. And Bernard might be on thin ice with the local wildlife. After saying goodbye to the mooncalves, the group seemed to run out of luck. They didn't encounter another animal for ages. Hey guys, check this out. Cologne reached out and plucked something from a tree trunk. He held it up for everyone to see, a few silvery white hairs. Unicorn hair. How could you even tell? Bernard couldn't help but complain, but he was also excited. It was a unicorn. He might have a pair of chopsticks made from unicorn horn, but he'd never seen a real, live unicorn. I just caught the light reflecting off it, Cologne explained. Looks like there's a unicorn nearby, and judging by the shine, it hasn't been gone long. He examined the hair closely. Unicorns are active during the day. They sleep at night. This one probably heard us coming, got spooked, and bolted, even ran into a tree. You mean it couldn't be far? Bernard asked, perking up. We could try to catch up. What's the point of chasing a unicorn? Eugene clapped Bernard on the shoulder. Unicorns only let virgins approach them. And some of us aren't even girls. We could at least get a glimpse from a distance. I've never seen one in person, Bernard said, clearly not wanting to miss out. Okay, let's take a peek, Adam agreed. We don't want to hurt it, just see it. So, the five of them followed the unicorn's trail. Judging by the tracks, the unicorn's not far ahead, huh? Cologne suddenly frowned. Do you guys hear that? Sounds like horse hooves, Eugene said, cutting him off. He frowned. Did that unicorn find its herd? Unicorns were social animals, but given their temperament, attacking a wizard on the road was one thing, but bringing the enemy back to the herd seemed odd. The sound of hooves grew louder. They waited, each gripping their wands, ready for anything. Despite their beauty and peaceful nature, unicorns were powerful fighters who lived in groups. Few creatures dared to prey on them, but when they finally saw what was approaching, they were both surprised and disappointed. It wasn't a unicorn, but a group of centaurs, about 20 of them. A centaur is a human from the waist up and a horse from the waist down, Eugene whispered, filling them in. The human hair and horse hair are the same color. Like mermaids, they have human intelligence but choose to live like beasts, close to nature, observing the stars. So that's why there are so many herbivores around, Adam murmured. The centaurs are protecting them. Are these the poachers you mentioned? Bernard asked. The centaurs, each carrying a bow and arrow, formed a circle around the five friends. The leader frowned, glancing at the others. Looks like a bunch of foals barely able to walk. The lead centaur stepped forward. Human cubs, you've crossed a line. This is our territory. Your territory? Last I checked, the Forbidden Forest belongs to Hogwarts. Students weren't allowed in, but like the abandoned classrooms, the Forbidden Forest still belonged to the school. Uther stood his ground. He looked up at the centaur, who was half a head taller, and held his gaze. The centaur kept coming, clearly intending to step on Uther. The hoof was raised, ready to stomp Uther, but Uther didn't flinch. The centaur narrowed his eyes, then pulled back. This isn't a place for you, go back where you belong. The hoof grazed Uther's body, then landed on the ground. The centaur turned and led the others away, the sound of their hooves echoing through the trees. Wow! Uther, that was awesome. You didn't back down for a second. Seeing the centaurs leave, Cologne sighed in relief and excitedly grabbed Uther's shoulders. I read that centaurs won't attack children, Uther said with a small smile. And if he'd kept coming, I wouldn't have regretted it. Despite his words, he was still shaken, his palms sweaty. Adam nodded, knowing that Uther had a protective spell ready, and that even if they hadn't acted, the centaur would have regretted it. Wizards generally look down on magical creatures. If a wizard could survive and report a magical creature that attacked them, that creature was usually doomed. And Uther's father was the Egyptian minister of magic. Chapter 76: The ambition to gather all the magical animals, food, in the world in one place. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, back we go, Adam suggested. Yeah, it's getting late. Let's do it. Sounds good to me. Me too. After the centaur's warning, even Bernard wasn't keen on pushing their luck. Maybe it's like that saying, you can try planting flowers, but they might not bloom, while the willows you ignore take root everywhere. Holy cow. The waning moon was dim, and snowflakes still danced in the air, but nothing could dim the unicorn's glow. It's beautiful. Bernard practically moaned. Don't spook it. The words were barely out of Cologne's mouth when the unicorn flicked its ears, turning its head towards them. Just when everyone thought it would bolt, it took a few hesitant steps back, then ambled towards them, drawn by something unseen. The unicorn, with a look of disdain, walked up to Adam, nipped at his sleeve, and tugged him away from the others. Then, with a contented snort, it began rubbing against him. The onlookers were speechless. Bernard finally broke the silence. Aren't unicorns supposed to only approach virgins? Yep. Cologne replied flatly. Maybe unsolicited unicorn encounters don't count. Thankfully, Adam hadn't forgotten his friends. After a few minutes of being utterly charmed by the unicorn's soft coat and otherworldly beauty, he snapped back to reality, promised to meet the unicorn again sometime, and said goodbye. Next time, he'd come alone and use a double card to maybe get a couple of unicorns to raise. The power of those love cards was undeniable. Adam was seriously considering a career as a magizoologist after graduation, or maybe a collector of magical creatures. Imagine a sanctuary with all kinds of magical animals from around the world. Achieving that solo would be tough, but Nicholas Flamel had left behind a network of contacts. Time to reach out to that senior he'd always admired. As for the restaurant and cinema, he could leave the day-to-day operations to the staff. Adam would just need to master the core tech. As if destiny was helping Adam pursue his interests, they stumbled upon two lone acromantulas on the way back. Well, lone was relative. Against Adam and his crew, two acromantulas were seriously outnumbered. Hold up, everyone. Adam stopped Uther and the others from drawing their wands, especially Cologne. He was still smarting from the last time, feeling helpless and unable to contribute. Looks like we've got a male and female pair. I'm taking them home to raise. You want to raise them? Cologne's expression was hard to read. Adam, no offense, but I'd rather you kept a basilisk in your bedroom than one of those giant spiders. I can shrink them. Adam waved the staff of darkness. The acromantula seemed to sense the basilisk aura and tried to flee, but suddenly the world seemed to grow larger, like they were looking through a filter, as they shrunk. Adam put them in a glass jar, punched some air holes in the lid, and said. Besides, I hear roasted spider is pretty good. If you really want to raise them, I guess it's not the worst thing. Cologne swallowed. Imagine an acromantula that could grow over 10 feet tall, all that meat. Sigh. Now that Adam had made up his mind, everyone who believed in Adam and his weird spider hobby had only one thing to say. Save me a plate. Adam was in high spirits on the way back. When they got to the dorm, he placed the acromantula jar on his bedside table, next to the basilisk jar. The spiders seemed stressed by their new neighbor, but they'd get used to it eventually. After failing to escape the jar, the acromantula pair, under duress, started mating, seemingly driven to produce offspring before meeting their maker. That wasn't a bad thing for Adam. He couldn't rely solely on copying and capturing magical creatures. Breeding was ideal, of course. Certain magical creatures were off-limits for breeding. If the double-card copy wasn't a perfect replica, and if Fawkes wasn't bound by contract to the Dumbledore family, Adam would have gotten himself a phoenix. But such magical animals were rare. He wasn't sure what normal spiders were like, but before Valentine's Day, Adam had cultivated a massive nest of acromantulas. Even shrunken and bottled, they were unsettling, that is, unless you'd already tried roasted acromantula, because then they just look like hairy king crabs. You guys need to grow fast, slurp. Cologne stared at the little spiders in the bottle and gulped. Adam, you don't have to wait for them to get that big. They look almost ready to eat now. They've only been hatched for a few days. Give it at least another month. Adam smacked his lips, he'd never tried grilled acromantula before. The sweet, tender spider meat coated in fat and the chewy silk sacs had won over everyone who tried it, including the chef, Adam himself. The flavor was unexpectedly fantastic. Roasted acromantula was definitely going to be a signature dish at his restaurant. But a 15-foot spider might be too expensive. If it's too cheap, no one will appreciate it. If it's too expensive, no one can afford it. Maybe it's better as a banquet special. By comparison, the month-old acromantula was nearly perfect. At that age, the spiders had toxins that made the meat more delicious when cooked, and the silk sacs were full and chewy. At that size, it was about one serving. If they could bring their own serving dish like scallops and oysters, Adam would proclaim the acromantula a gift from the god of food. Compared to the acromantula, the basilisk was a letdown. It wasn't completely inedible, but the meat was tough and fishy. It was fine stewed with seasonings, but tasted like regular snake soup and couldn't compete with the spider. The only surprise was the basilisk's eyes. The eyes, blinded by fox's claws, were tough and impervious to a kitchen knife. Adam used a sword card to extract them, and they still had enough magic to petrify living things. Adam thought that after studying alchemy, he could refine the eyeballs into magical items, but this pair wasn't going to last that long, because the eyeballs were magical and might be too much for foreigners. Adam treated the eyeballs with an impurity removal spell and roasted them like pig eyes, eating them through tears. So good. Just to clarify, Adam was surprised by the taste of the basilisk's eyes, which were surprisingly good. Chapter 77 Happy New Year. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Christmas break always feels too short. Barely a week goes by before everyone heads back to Hogwarts for the second half of the year, but the Hufflepuffs weren't feeling bummed about the holiday ending. They were pumped for the extra celebration they got compared to the other houses, Chinese New Year. Last year, after some serious badgering, Adam promised to celebrate the new year with everyone. He even sweet-talked Professor Sprout into letting them use 4 underground classrooms and the main corridor as the venue. After she signed off on it, she even said she'd swing by and join the fun. Even though it's called New Year's, the festivities actually kick off a few weeks early. For 1 silver sickle, you can get into the venue and chow down on pretty much any food that's not marked off limits. It's all about having a good time. There are also games like ring toss and beanbag toss, with extra snacks and prizes. Those are free, but you only get a limited number of tries, and no cheating with magic. What's this? A Hufflepuff thing? What are you two doing here? Bernard was surprised to spot the Weasley twins hanging out in a corner. Adam invited us special. Our inventions are perfect for the holiday vibe. Care for a beautiful, totally safe firework? First one's half price, and the second one's 20% off. The Weasley twins chimed in, hawking their wares. Nah, I'm good. It's a holiday, after all. Why mess with a good thing? This time is different. We swear on our lives, these fireworks are legit holiday items. If one explodes and turns out to be a prank, you can tell Adam to toss us into the mandrake pot. Yikes, that's a serious oath. Bernard was intrigued. Give me 2. Thanks for your business. What colors you want? That while the twins were raking it in, Adam was holding court on his end. Adam, is this the New Year's Eve dinner? Ernie clutched his fancy laba porridge, full of nuts, which he'd just snagged. It tasted great, but it wasn't quite what Adam described last year. It's laba now, so we eat laba porridge. Then there's Little New Year's Day, when we worship the kitchen god and eat kitchen candy. Finally, New Year's Eve dinner. And don't forget the Lantern Festival with the glutinous rice balls. Patience, young Padawan. Gulp. The sound of collective swallowing echoed around them. The badgers were excited about all the grub still to come, but also bummed that they had to wait so long to eat it. If only time would fly. Besides the regular food and games you could access with a silver sickle, there were also bonus goodies up for grabs if you participated in special New Year's Eve events. But those required some prep, so Adam had given everyone a heads up. Cedric had already started practicing the lion dance for the egg yolk-filled lion pastries that were on the line, and he was determined to win first place. He was making his roommate practice with him every day. The 6-foot-tall Maltose dragon also had plenty of badgers excited to try their hand at the dragon dance. But Adam nixed most of the teams, because he wasn't counting Western dragons in the competition. To keep everyone hyped, Adam was planning a massive candy buffet for Kitchen God Day. It would include round sugar melons, long, hollow guandong candies, short, thick mouse tails, peanuts coated in white sugar, peanut brittle, sesame brittle. Only 7 or 8 base ingredients, but with different methods and shapes, he'd created dozens of combos, turning the venue into a sweet, sugary paradise. After worshipping the kitchen god, the badgers could grab whatever they wanted from the candy ocean. Adam wondered if the kitchen god would be surprised to see a bunch of foreign kids among his worshippers this year. In Chinese legends, the kitchen god reports to the gods in heaven every year about all the bad stuff the family did. So we make sticky, sweet candies to glue his mouth shut and stop him from ratting us out. Besides the food, Adam was also sharing some Chinese mythology. Of course, if they hadn't heard it yet, these badgers were going to regret it during the Lantern Festival. New Year's Eve was finally on the horizon. But the day before, Professor Dumbledore came to Adam looking stressed. Are the other houses allowed to participate? Adam was momentarily speechless. Talk about cultural exchange. He was probably the first person in this era to export Chinese culture, directly influencing the next generation of British wizards. But I'm not ready. Maybe, next year. Well, I'm getting a lot of pressure here. Could you maybe make some extra candy to appease them? Professor Dumbledore asked, glancing towards the sweet, fragrant air. Professor, if I'm being honest, you're the one who wants the candy, aren't you? Adam hesitated. But everyone helped set up the venue, and this was supposed to be a thank you for their support, so it's super cheap. If we suddenly open it up to everyone. Professor Dumbledore didn't say anything, but he discreetly dabbed at the corners of his eyes, finally squeezing out a few tears. Ugh, fine. But if everyone really wants to join. Adam's eyes suddenly lit up. It's not impossible at all. I hereby announce the first ever Hogwarts Spring Festival Gala has officially begun. Professor Dumbledore, wearing a bright red robe, stood in front of the Great Hall, beaming and raising his hands. The Great Hall erupted in applause. Ahem. Professor Dumbledore pulled a red program sheet from his pocket and cleared his throat. So, for the opening act, the Slytherin team, led by Draco Malfoy, will give us a, fashion show. Professor Dumbledore blinked. Why was our show changed? Draco was backstage, reluctantly being forced into a tang suit. His pale face and silver outfit actually looked pretty good. Your original program was cancelled. Something about, my head of house father. That kind of thing is not going to fly at this party. Adam smacked Draco on the head with the program. Alright, get your team ready. Humph. Draco scoffed, turning and calling for Crabbe and Goyle. If it weren't for the fact that his outfit looked pretty fly, Crabbe and Goyle weren't as handsome as Draco, but their festive outfit still looked pretty slick, which made Draco stand out even more. I bet these outfits would sell like crazy. Looking at Draco's back, Adam stroked his chin, realizing he'd just stumbled upon a new business opportunity. Chapter 78. Life goes on, and so does death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The competition's up next. Registered students, head backstage to get ready. Everyone else, enjoy the snacks. Professor Dumbledore glanced at the list of participants, mostly Hufflepuff students, and sighed. Hufflepuff started prepping a month ago, the other houses only got the memo yesterday. How could they even compete? Turns out, they couldn't. The few teams from other houses were just there to fill slots. Every single team in the semi-finals for all three events was from Hufflepuff. The other houses, railroaded into this thing, didn't complain. Their teams were already prepping for next year. First up, the lion dance. A killer lion dance takes 10 years of sweat for 1 minute on stage, but Adam wasn't holding them to that. Each team got 3 minutes for a freestyle performance, judged by the 4 deans, Professor Dumbledore, and Adam. Cedric and his roommate nailed it with the sickest lion shape and the most fluid moves, snagging first place with a perfect score. Adam caught that the butt-shaking lion tail was Cedric's roommate, but who would have guessed it was Cedric himself? This kid, all big eyes and bushy brows, is actually. You sure that was you too? Adam was awarding the first prize for the Hogwarts Lion Dance competition, the championship trophy and a year's supply of awakening lion cakes, for both the lion head and tail. A year's supply meant during Hogwarts school year, only on the 2 days a week Adam's place was open. They could grab 5 cakes each visit. The year ran from New Year's Day to New Year's Eve, which was plenty to keep them happy. Cedric took the prize himself, while his roommate, blushing, gave his share to a Hufflepuff girl. Adam, suddenly hit with the single awareness. Whatever, good for them. If they wanted to tie the knot after graduation, he did wedding cakes and favors, too. Besides the first place prize, second and third got runner-up and third place trophies, lion dance themed, but less fancy. Every team member also got a lion dance cake, a participation prize. After the lion dance, dragon dance and lantern competitions followed right after. Dragon dance was all about hands-on skills, like the lantern contest. The lion dance allowed for more creative expression, but the dragon dance had less wiggle room. Vivian's dorm won the dragon dance. The dragon head had clearly done some research, and theirs was the only team with dragon balls. Qiu Zhang won the lantern contest. Her big red lantern featured a golden phoenix silhouette, wings spread, ready to fly. Lighting the candle gave it some extra life. After the awards, Hogwarts' New Year's Eve party was just about done. Back in the Hufflepuff common room, everyone hung back, waiting. Professor Sprout was there, too. Soon, an unbelievable aroma wafted from the boys' dorms. Even though everyone had just stuffed themselves in the Great Hall, they all started drooling, feeling hungry again. What was this stuff? Buddha jumps over the wall, coming up. Adam's voice followed the scent: dried abalone, sea cucumber, fish maw, ham, shiitake mushrooms, pig's feet, winter bamboo shoots, scallops, clams. Over a dozen high-end ingredients, prepped separately, then added to an old hen soup, sealed in a jar, and simmered for 16 hours on low. Even Adam was salivating at the first whiff. Since everyone had already eaten, Adam didn't make much, 1 clay pot per person, but he didn't skimp on the ingredients. This pot of Buddha jumps over the wall was what sold the Hufflepuffs on Chinese cuisine, ensuring it always had a spot in the top 10 at Adam's restaurant. Maybe Adam put too much into the Chinese New Year. Lockhart, who hadn't been hitting on new fans lately, felt like he could get back in the game and picked what he thought was the perfect time. As Adam prepped for the Lantern Festival, Valentine's Day snuck up on Hogwarts. Walking into the Great Hall on Valentine's Day, Adam stopped dead. The hall, decked out in red just days before, was now drowning in pink flowers, and heart-shaped confetti floated down from the ceiling, landing on the plates at the head table. Adam knew exactly who was responsible and looked at the teacher's table. Spotting Lockhart taking it all in with satisfaction, Adam felt drained. Lockhart was a psychological marvel. Every time Adam thought he'd finally dealt a blow, Lockhart bounced back, ready to embarrass himself all over again. Maybe for Lockhart, not being the center of attention was worse than death. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone, Lockhart chirped, oblivious to the frosty looks from his colleagues. Yes, these surprises are from yours truly. Thank you to the 71 fans who sent me cards and those who were too shy to express their love. Lockhart flashed a grin. Just then, an owl swooped into the hall, dropping off an envelope with a huge heart to Lockhart. He snatched it. Oh, another love letter. Thanks to this fan. Who's sending him Valentine's Day cards? Cologne whispered. Between Chinese New Year and the Lantern Festival, he hadn't even noticed Valentine's Day. Who knows? Maybe it's him. Uther smirked. I asked Professor Flitwick about Lockhart, and he shared some interesting stories from his Hogwarts days. Like the time he mailed himself hundreds of love letters on Valentine's Day. Wait, he wrote love letters to himself? Why? Uther looked at Lockhart. He probably wanted everyone to think he was popular, but now he knows sending hundreds at once isn't realistic. Chapter 79 The End of Lockhart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey, why were you visiting Professor Flitwick anyway? Bernard perked up, sensing something. What's so weird about that? Isn't Adam getting extra help from Flitwick too? Uther raised an eyebrow. I heard Professor Flitwick used to be a dueling champion, so I was picking his brain about it. Eugene eyed Uther. You interested in the dueling competition? Maybe. Dueling competition, huh? Bernard mused, but they dropped the topic. Right on cue, Lockhart gave a signal, and a bunch of dwarves dressed like Cupid angels waddled into the hall. Let's just say, the outfits themselves weren't the problem. It's just that dwarves look a bit like mandrakes that have been pulled from the ground after growing up, so the overall effect was jarring. Welcome our darling little cupids with their Valentine's cards. Lockhart boomed, clapping enthusiastically, seemingly the only one enjoying the spectacle. But he didn't seem to care. They'll be roaming the school today, delivering your Valentine's messages. And I'm sure my colleagues will be just as enthusiastic. Lockhart winked. Why not ask Professor Snape for tips on brewing love potions? Adam couldn't help but glance at Snape. Professor, are you going to take that lying down? Snape's expression was thunderous. The last time he looked this awful was when he drew Harry's name in the Triwizard Tournament. If anyone actually did ask, Snape would probably throw them straight into the cauldron. Lockhart wasn't finished. And if you're interested in something a bit more psychedelic, I dare say Professor Flitwick knows more than any wizard, the sly old dog. Adam looked at Flitwick. The usually dignified and thin-skinned head of Ravenclaw looked like he was about to faint. Lockhart smacked his lips, seeming disappointed, and finally shut up. He'd originally planned a much bigger show. Seeing how Adam's made-up holiday had become such a huge success, stealing all the school's attention, Lockhart had considered trying to one-up him, but then he'd thought twice. Adam was just as good at grabbing attention as he was. What if Adam ended up stealing his thunder? So, in the end, Lockhart had reluctantly abandoned the idea, but just because Lockhart let Adam off the hook didn't mean Adam was going to let him off. The next morning, during herbology, dwarves kept bursting into Greenhouse 2, hoarsely reciting or singing love poems to random people in the class, accompanied by a ludicrous harp performance. Adam was mortified, but he couldn't deny a certain satisfaction, especially since Uther was one of the targets. That is, until it was his turn. After class, Adam walked over to the girl who looked like she was about to turn to stone after getting a love letter, gently rejected her confession, grabbed his dark staff, and stormed toward Lockhart's office. Count me in. Uther growled, drawing his wand with a dark look on his face. Of course, Adam wouldn't do anything as rash as attacking a professor or casting a spell, and naturally, Uther wouldn't do anything impulsive either. Calm down, Adam. Bernard shouted, wrapping his arms around Adam's waist. Let me go. I'm gonna kill him, Arf. Uther, snap out of it. Murder is against the law. Cologne yelled, tackling Uther from behind. Don't worry. My dad's the Minister of Magic. Eugene declared. Then, Eugene silently crept behind the four of them, threw his arms around them, and they all crashed to the ground. Finally, peace. After cooling off, Adam had to admit that if they let Lockhart continue, the guy might actually do something truly awful. This loose cannon needed to be dealt with, and fast. Too bad the professors knew he'd solved the basilisk problem in the Chamber of Secrets. Otherwise, if Lockhart accidentally got eaten, you could just chalk it up to bad luck. Wait a minute. Hadn't he promised Dumbledore not to hurt any of the professors? Oh well, Lockhart wasn't worth it. Time to get writing. On this night, Gilderoy Lockhart faced the most terrifying day of his life. Seized by inspiration, Adam decided to forego the quick quotes quill and personally chronicle Lockhart's downfall. Seeing the ghost nun haunt his house again, Lockhart was startled, but not terrified. He'd realized that no matter what illusions he saw, they were just illusions. Even if he could see them with his eyes closed, they couldn't hurt him. "Hey! Crazy lady, over here!" Lockhart taunted, even daring to reach out and poke the ghost nun. The ghost nun smiled, opened her mouth, and bit. Crunch star. Lockhart stared at his severed finger in disbelief for a split second, then was consumed by terror. Why wasn't she following the script this time? Overcome with pain and fear, Lockhart bolted from the office. The ghost nun watched him flee with a faint smile, then slowly followed him out the door. Lockhart scrambled away from the office, running for his life. But the hallway, which was usually short, seemed to stretch out into infinity. As his strength began to fail, Lockhart glanced back. The ghost nun was standing just a few feet behind him, next to the door of his office. Seeing Lockhart turn around, the ghost nun lunged forward and opened her mouth. "I have some sad news to share." One day after the Lantern Festival, Professor Dumbledore walked to the front of the Great Hall. "Just yesterday, our defense against the dark arts professor, Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart, surrendered to the Ministry of Magic after being caught casting obliviation charms on several wizards and stealing their experiences in order to write novels." A shocked murmur rippled through the hall. "And today," Dumbledore continued, quieting the crowd, "he has been taken into Ministry custody. Azkaban will be his home for the rest of his life." Dumbledore's eyes were somber. "Let this be a lesson to you all. I hope you never become such a person. In the meantime, your defense against the dark arts classes will be taught by the heads of houses before. You can rest assured that exams won't be affected. That's all I have to say." After dinner, Professor McGonagall found Adam. "Professor Dumbledore wishes to see you in his office." Chapter 80 Truth and Coincidence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "Adam, anything you'd like to add about Mr. Lockhart's story?" Professor Dumbledore's eyes were calm, radiating trust in Adam's intentions. Adam thought the professor's loyalty was a bit much. He seemed endlessly tolerant toward students he'd taken a shine to, Newt, Hagrid, Harry, and now him. He wondered how Voldemort had affected Dumbledore back then. "It's a regrettable situation, Professor," Adam said with a sigh. "It was the best I could do on the fly. Who knew Professor Lockhart would suddenly hit me with an obliviate? I just threw up a mirror card to defend myself." From Lockhart's point of view, he was being haunted by the ghost nun and never left his office. But the truth was, he ran smack into Adam doing his homework. Facing a vengeful ghost nun, Lockhart instinctively, or maybe was forced to instinctively, used his most familiar attack on the person in front of him, Adam. He whipped out his wand and cast Obliviate, but the mirror card reflected it right back, and Ms. Gray happened to be passing by and saw the whole thing. It was all so coincidental. "I already know what happened." Ms. Gray witnessed the entire event, Professor Dumbledore said, smiling and conjuring a plate of candies. Adam recognized them instantly. "Aren't those my creations?" He grabbed one at random and popped it in his mouth. "Yep, definitely his." "I've known about Lockhart for a while," Professor Dumbledore sighed, taking a candy himself. "Two of the wizards whose stories he stole were acquaintances of mine. I recognized their adventures, but the hero had changed. Coupled with Lockhart's behavior at school, I was deeply disappointed. You'll soon understand." Dumbledore paused, then looked at Adam. "Aren't you curious why I hired him as the defense against the dark arts professor?" "Well, I was confused at first, but hearing you say you knew the truth about Lockhart, I figured it out." "Oh." Dumbledore's eyebrows shot up. "You wanted him to expose himself, right? He might have gotten away with just writing novels, but in front of all these students and professors, Lockhart's true nature would come out, and it sure did." Adam finished his candy and, finding nothing else he wanted, used the Rod of Darkness to conjure a bunch more. Then Professor Dumbledore reached for a fruit-filled gummy. "Adam?" Okay, Professor, your stash is running low, and you want me to replenish it. Got it, whatever, call it advertising costs." Dumbledore's dessert is a hot brand at Hogwarts. Under Dumbledore's innocent gaze, Adam reluctantly ate a peach-flavored candy and continued, also, you're using Lockhart to teach us a lesson. It's hard to teach people what they should be, but it only takes one bad example to teach them what they shouldn't be. Lockhart's perfect for that. Professor Dumbledore beamed. He hadn't expected Adam to grasp it so quickly. The boy was sharp. Finally, there's the defense against the dark arts curse. I heard from Cedric that the professor changes every year for some reason, and it's been that way for decades. Oblivious to Dumbledore's frozen smile, Adam poked the professor's sore spot and kept going. Professor Quirrell died in a freak accident last year, which must have made recruiting a professor really tough. Forced to dwell on the troublesome situation, Dumbledore felt a headache coming on and tossed a few more candies into his mouth. What flavor is this? I've never tasted this before. Realizing he was getting distracted, Dumbledore quickly gathered his thoughts and sighed inwardly. Last year's defense against the dark arts search was a nightmare. And now Lockhart. Who am I going to find next year? His appetite vanished. You're right, Adam. Looks like I'll have to reach out to some old colleagues. Hopefully, they'll agree to spend a year teaching at Hogwarts. You're dismissed. Okay, Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore's questions were just an expected formality. Adam could even get back to preparing for the Lantern Festival riddles. English made guessing riddles a challenge, so Adam slipped some traditional Chinese knowledge, stuff he'd read in books, and info about the snacks from his shop into the questions. He wasn't trying to create some dive restaurant. With 2 successful restaurateurs at home, he knew that high-end dining wasn't just about cooking. You had to tell stories, too. Cooking was just the initial draw. For customers to stick around, they had to connect with the culture you were selling them, but unlike his parents, who had to spend a fortune on marketing, Adam could just use different flavored glutinous rice balls to get the future wizards of Britain buzzing about the stories he wanted to tell. They should be thanking him. Adam. Thank you. The students who got the question bank manual from Adam beamed. Sesame, peanut, red bean, lamb, pork, beef. The long tables in the great hall were gone, replaced by rows of lanterns and long lines of students. After solving the riddle, the lantern would spit out a note, which they'd take to the event NPCs. The professors, to get their glutinous rice balls. Each professor had popular flavors, but the heads of house also had limited editions specially crafted by Adam. Professor McGonagall's taro dumplings, Professor Flitwick's cheese dumplings, Professor Snape's crab dumplings, and Professor Sprout's osmanthus wine dumplings. The Gryffindors were taking initiative in front of Snape, all for the sake of food. Adam was proud. He hadn't had high hopes for Dumbledore's chocolate dumplings. To him, they were a bit of a culinary disaster, but they turned out to be a hit.